happened, so this was a whole thing. So then they found out that Peggy was a derivative of Margaret, so I became Margaret Sue. But I was called Peggy Sue most of my life. The really weird thing is my mother's sister, my mother was one of 12, right? The sister closest to her in age, my Aunt B, who had 30,000 children, I don't know. She had a lot of kids. She had my cousin around the same time, maybe we're going to say within a month or so we were both born. And you know, back in the day, they hadn't really talked to each other, but my aunt also had named her daughter Margaret. So she became Meg in her family, and so that I could be Peg, or Peggy Sue. Anyway, so the main character of the book, her name is, in French you would say Zian. And she, after she has a little bit of revelation about her parents and her father and not liking the control her father is putting over her, she decides that she's going to be Dee Dee. And then by the time we meet her as an adult, she just goes by Dee. But she actually, you see the evolution of how she kind of changes with the change in her name. The Langlais Langlois thing, or Langlais Langlois, that's a whole nightmare in itself, right? I mean, but there's so many French names like that they're so close. It happens to me all the time with my married name, Dubois. People always think they know how to spell it, but then I'm Dubois or I don't even know what else. They either leave out the L, or they change the E to a U, or they do both, or they say Dubois. I'm like, no. So anyway, so there's a lot with these French names. So there's so many similarities between all of them. And then the two main characters in the sort of the origin story, Frank and Francois, that was a whole thing too. For you knew growing up if someone was from a French Canadian family and had a French Canadian name, they would be Francois. But Frank, if he was saying his name was Frank, that was because his parents were most definitely not French Canadian, and he would want you to know that. That was so that was a whole thing too. And Blackie. So in French families, I don't know how many of you know this, but in French families, there's always 1,000 kids, and they're all named colors. By colors. Le noir, le gris, la rouge, right? Yes, yeah. I mean, it's that, and so that's Blackie, right? So almost every family I knew actually had a Blackie in it. That was a typical one. And again, my Uncle Blackie was, the whole time I knew him, was confined to a wheelchair. So that was when I came up with the idea of Blackie first. And then I was like, oh, this is what's going to happen here. Like, these two boys are going to clash, and Blackie's ending up in a wheelchair. I just kind of knew that. Henri and Henri, I'll read you this from page 268, but my hand to heart, I realized this when I was writing the scene, which is very close to the end of the book. So I wrote this entire book and never picked up on this until I was writing the scene. Which I know that sounds weird, but it really is how like your brain works when you sit down to write. You don't know what you're doing, you just go with it, and then all of a sudden you discover these things. So this is much later, and Henri and Zian are adults, and they are sitting together for the first time in years, and they've had a whole discussion, and now we're at sort of the end of the discussion, and it says, Henri sits at the table with her, flips through the file folder, looking for something. Ah, here it is, Diane, he says, pulling a piece of paper closer to his face so he can read it. It says here your son's name is A-R-I. Now, how do you pronounce that name? Dee smiles. It really is like being back in middle school, having a lesson at the kitchen table. Ari, she says, smiling. Simple enough. Henri just looks at her, a smile of his own slowly creeping up his cheeks. Sounds an awful lot like my name now, doesn't it? Dee pulls back from Henri for a moment, considering the coincidence. She She tilts her head slightly and wonders how she has never thought of it before. Henri. She has subconsciously been saying Henri's name every day for the last 18 years. It's weird, right? It's weird to be a writer, I'm telling you. Those are things, it's like when you write things like that, you're like, oh, I need to go to bed now. It's a lot. Okay. So this is a picture of my beautiful mom who passed away just in November. She was 99, had Alzheimer's, and she was just a dear. But she knew us, she knew her children right up to the end. We were very, very blessed with that. And luckily, my book was published before she passed away, so I was able to bring it to her. So that was very special. In fact, this is her copy. That's why I use this one for my readings. She really couldn't read at that point. She couldn't, really comprehend but she had gotten this far. She had gotten to page 30. This was her little bookmark that she had, so I just stuck it right there. Really, this book for me is very much about strong women. Marion, who is Diane's mother, sort of, is her adopted mother, is, goes from this idea of she was this abandoned orphan to being a very independent woman at the end of the book when we see her again. Lucille, I love. Everybody usually loves Lucille because she just refuses to let Frank get away with what he did in the book. I don't like to give it away to people who haven't read it. Pauline, again, I don't want to give that away either, but she chooses a path. She was a very interesting character for me. And she, I felt, chose a path that really was probably one of her only options, the only options for a woman in that day, that she could be truly independent. Agnes, she was Frank's mother. People often don't remember who Agnes was. I have volumes of notes on Agnes. I could write a whole book about Agnes, and I might. She is, I feel like, uses the only tactic she knows, right? She's from an even older generation there in the book, but for her to get security as a single mother, in particular, she had to do everything she could to get what she wanted in life. And then Dee really kind of lived by this mantra of, which is what the epigraph is in the book. It comes from Dickens. Ask no questions and you'll be told the wise. And it's a very famous saying, and I think if you probably have been in that position before in your life where you know something's not quite right, but you're not going to ask any questions because you don't really want to know, right? And that was Dee's case. That was really Dee's biggest burden through her whole life, that she knew there was stuff going on that she should have confronted, and she just turned her face from it, and that was why she goes on this very important journey to try to rectify that. So, if you will bear with me, I'm going to read this poem to you. So, this is a poem that I wrote, which is sort of it really is a mix of things I learned about my mother's mother, but also about my father.